Hello there. Maybe just to ask a few more questions, either that they might have about your application. What would you do if, I don't know, a client came back to you and said that your work is trash and started to berate you and your whole household? Obviously, very extreme example, and I've never heard of such malarkey in my life. Hi everyone, and welcome to Apprenticeish, where we talk all about apprentices, apprenticeships, kind of. So the precursor of this video is literally just because I've obviously done a sister apprenticeship application and have been successful. And also I've done quite a few applications and obviously spoken to apprentices from across LinkedIn and obviously my friendship group as well to see the application process. So that it varies obviously from firm to firm. I'm going to put a disclaimer up right now. The first thing to be aware of is that different firms do different things entirely. Like, depending on what firm you go to, they might do the same application processes if you were going to become a paralegal or a trainee, or they might create a separate process for the solicitor apprenticeship entirely. So obviously what I'm about to talk you through is going to vary depending on what firm you go to, and obviously the culture of the firm, what they value, what's important to them, all that kind of stuff. So I just wanted to add on to that disclaimer to be mindful of that and think about the firm you're applying for. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. The first part is the application process. The application process is obviously when you go to look for a sister apprenticeship, they will have the application on their website, or you might need to send in your CV, or you might need to fill out a document which kind of like outlines what it is the firm is looking for, basic questions about background, your name, ethnicity, all that kind of stuff, criminal convictions, if you guys have any disabilities or something like that. That will usually be in this initial stage of the application. The different job related questions that they might ask, I don't even know why they would ask such madness, but it's just to be aware of things like, why do you want to work at this firm? It's kind of like a mix between what you'd expect on an interview and what you expect on the application. On the application, they don't usually go through so much information, but it's sometimes it can be quite detailed and quite intense, but in other cases it's very simple. They might ask 3 or 4 questions until they get to see you, so how you conduct yourself, how you present yourself, all of that good stuff. When you're going to make those applications, please make sure you actually read about the firm. I made a TikTok a while ago about a mistake that I have made, and also I'm sure other people have made as well, which is literally to just
please be alarmed, do not remain calm.
Use the same application for multiple firms. Do not do that. Please do not. Even if you spend 2 hours or an hour on the application, make sure you do it properly. It definitely took me longer to do the application process to just do the initial application for each firm that I applied for. But even if it takes you a very short period of time, please do not just grab one thing from one firm and put it in another firm's application, because I'm sure they'll be able to tell not everything is relevant. Tailor it to that firm. Or the second part of that process is a pre-screening test. So obviously this part kind of varies depending on where you apply. As I always say, there might not be a pre-screening test. You might just go straight from the application process right into the next part. But the pre-screening test can literally consist of a firm might get, or a company might get, a very high number of applicants. So one reason they might be doing a pre-screening test, as well as to obviously vet their candidates, is to be able to reduce the numbers of applications that they have to go through. Hello there. I know you're in the middle of watching this video, but what I have noticed is you haven't subscribed yet. And I'm not her. So dang, you can't even subscribe? Enjoy the rest of the video, but you can subscribe too. The next point is like a non-face-to-face interview. So this could be a telephone interview, or it could be like a video interview. And by that, I mean, it's like so they will, for the telephone one, obviously it'll be a phone conversation, maybe just to ask a few more questions, either that they might have about your application, or the one that I remember having was actually with the learning institution. It wasn't with the actual firm, but there's no reason why a firm couldn't use that as part of the application process, or a company. But the video part of the interview, the experience that I had was when I was going through the pre-screening part. I think this is kind of all part of the pre-screening, but could be another type of pre-screening, which is they obviously give you practice questions, and questions will pop up on the screen, and then you have like, I think maybe 15 seconds or 30 seconds to think of an answer, and then the camera will automatically start recording your answer to that question. You'll have a chance to review it and submit it, or I think you only have like a certain amount of redos, but you could equally have as many redos as you want. When you're doing those kinds of interviews, you obviously want to make sure you have good connection. It's quiet, you can actually be heard, because you can't really bounce off their energy. It's literally just, if it's a video interview, obviously COVID reason for having the interview over like video call is different to having you recording yourself through their system to answer questions. So the next part is actually getting to the interview stage. If you've gotten to this part, this is the in-person interview. The interview could virtually be the whole day. It depends on how they've structured it. It could be half a day, could be an hour or 2 hours. It's usually quite a long time from what I've heard as well as what I've experienced. It's never just like, oh, come in for like a literal face-to-face interview and then go. There's usually different elements to it, which I'm going to break down. So the first thing to know is, guys, the interview starts as soon as you leave your house. As soon as.
I don't care if you live in a village somewhere and there's nobody that lives around. The moment you step out your house, the interview has begun.
And I always say this because you never know who you're going to interact with. You never know what relation they have with literally anyone. Like, obviously you can apply this to any time or any point in your life, but you could, and I've heard of situations like this where the person has interacted with their interviewer, like in the morning as they're getting on the train, and then, later on see them in the interview that they're applying for. Can you imagine if you were rude and like barged them out the way or something like that? Listen, you don't know who they're talking to, and you want to make sure your application is fantastic, but as well as your in-person interviewing skills, your character matches. If you're not naturally like that, there's obviously a few basic tips. Really basic. Arrive on time, dress appropriately, make sure you're clean. Another part of like the in-person interviewing process are the questions. So there's usually going to be, or from my experience, and I've heard from other people's experiences, there's usually going to be like some kind of written, mathematical, some kind of something. So they might ask you to write like a short essay. They might ask you to answer like a few maths questions to test your ability to do basic calculus, basic math, sorry. So the next step, or the next part, I'm going to split it into two, which is about the interviewing process. So the actual interview itself can vary depending on what firm you're going to. It can be a one-to-one interview. It can be a panel interview. And I kind of want to add it to the next bit, the final section that I wanted to speak about as well, which is group tasks. This is just my hypothesis. The reason why firms do that is so that they can themselves know, like, she crazy. Is he able to work in a team? Do we want that character in this place? So it's just to see like your ability to work in a team and problem solve, critically analyze a particular situation. Not stressed enough. I think one of the pieces of advice that I got way back in 2014 was like, when you do group tasks, do not go crazy and start controlling everything to the point where, like, it's good to be organized, and if you're leading the team, fine, but leadership and like dictatorship, very different styles there, very different. So just make sure when you're doing those kinds of interviews, you are being yourself. If the truth will come out in any case, and also try to be vocal about what your thought process is, because obviously people are going to be examining that and deciding whether or not you get the role based on that as part of their whole decision, if that makes sense. When you get to the actual interview itself, no matter the format that they come in, you might be asked about that group project. If it went well, say it went well and the reasons why, but always talk about points that could have been improved, that could have been better, because chances are it was not a perfect presentation. It was not a perfect, group gathering. You've met these people for a total of like 1 hour or two. Maybe you get on like house and fire. Is that the same? I don't even know. But you guys get what I mean. I'm going to say wood and fire. I feel like that makes more sense. I know that's not the same, but it just, anyway.
Stop.
It's very important that you're able to show and demonstrate your ability to, assess situations and that kind of stuff. So that is my tip there. But in terms of the actual interview itself, they can ask you about literally anything. I think I would always say, make sure that you know what the company does, what area of law that they specialize in, make sure you demonstrate you understand the role, and then basic stuff. Why do you want to do an apprenticeship? Why not the traditional route? Are you interested in the areas of law, and why? Why that particular law firm? I think always be prepared for a mixture of like problem-based questions. So they might give you a scenario. What would you do if, I don't know, a client came back to you and said that your work is trash and started to berate you and your whole household? Obviously, very extreme example, and I've never heard of such malarkey in my life. But it's just an example of like a problem question that they might ask. Speak with someone and practice an interview with them. And I think the only other thing I would say is just be yourself when you're in those interviewing situations, because it will, like, you can't fake it. The truth will And also, if you have any questions, or the questions that I tend to ask about is if I'm unsure of it, and also if I literally just want to gain the interviewer's perspective, what is the company culture? What are your strongest values? And that could be a reason why you want to go to that particular firm, because you really believe in the work that they do, and how they operate as a firm, or a company. So yeah, that's kind of like a very brief overview of the solicitor apprenticeship application process. I hope that helped. I obviously cannot say that this applies to all degree apprenticeships amongst all industries, because obviously I'm not in every other industry. But what I can say is that I hope that you found this video very useful, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to like and comment and share and subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye.